Joining us now from London to take a look at this story, Tom Bergin, European Corporate Strategy Correspondent for Reuters. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today. Of course, there's a very multi-layered story and very many aspects to it, but let's start from the perspective of human rights groups, because this has been obviously an issue with regards to them paying security forces who are supposedly corrupt. I mean, we had the issue of the hanging of Ken Saro-Wiwa, who tried to force Shell out of the Ogoniland region. That's symbolic of the fact that the military government, who was supported by Shell, took action against descendants. From your perspective, do human rights groups have a leg to stand on?
You know, Nigeria is probably cited most frequently as the best example of the oil curse. So the question always, and that is the tendency sometimes of the discovery of oil to actually make a country poorer and disadvantage it in terms of development. Now, so that always means that the question over Shell and its activity there, Shell has been the largest operator in Nigeria for some time. The question is always being, is Nigeria helping Shell, or is Nigeria helping Shell is Shell helping Nigeria get worse? So Shell constantly argues that it's actually a force for good in Nigeria, but when we see figures like this today and seeing that it's paying well over $100 million per year on security there, and some of it potentially going into the hands of individuals who are not working for the advantage of Nigeria, this does boost the questions, or certainly boost the argument for those who would say that Shell is not a force for good in Nigeria. So this today, while not a smoking gun of inappropriate behaviour, is certainly embarrassing for Shell and brings this debate back to the fore again about whether it's doing good there or contributing to the problems.
Of course, you know, it's also in light of what's taking place globally, companies being scrutinized for where they are doing business. I mean, we saw the issues with Standard Chartered, the latest being Deutsche Bank, and allegations around being involved in Iran and Syria. I mean, how does this end for Shell? Is it likely that Shell is going to then start pulling away from a place like Nigeria and choose to work in areas where there's just less criticism and less open to issues like this?
Well, it's interesting. I think that investors may see this story today, and it may reinforce in their minds the wisdom of the company's current strategy, which is to move its focus away from Nigeria. Nigeria was very much a bedrock of Shell production for many years, but over the past 5 years it's really lost its primacy in the Shell portfolio. Shell is looking to countries like the US, where there's a big shale gas revolution going on. It's looking to China, where the company hopes there will be a shale gas revolution, and to places like Qatar for its future production. And this is really for many reasons. One of them, of course, is just the difficulty of doing business in Nigeria. The fact that you do actually have to spend a lot of money on security there and keeping people safe in a way that you don't have to in Houston. But of course, also another reason why Shell is losing or falling out of love with Nigeria is really just the extent to which Nigeria attaches a bad odor to Shell. You mentioned there Ken Saro-Wiwa, and his death in 1995 was deeply embarrassing for the company, because it was partly blamed by NGOs for his death. And realistically, the headlines that come out, involving Shell in Nigeria are almost consistently negative. So certainly from Shell's perspective and from investors in Shell, this is something that suggests, yes, they should continue the strategy of moving away.
I mean, it could be a double-edged sword, because while human rights groups are wanting to protect the rights of those living in Nigeria, if you're having investors pulling away from the country, from a staple in terms of Nigerian revenues, you could in fact be damaging to the economy and then damaging to jobs. I mean, what light does this shed on the oil and gas sector and the outlook for it if big companies like this start pulling away?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and it's very much something that we always put as journalists to NGOs, and it's one I don't know. There's a clear answer, but if Shell moves out, somebody will take over the fields. So Shell has been selling fields. Its buyers have mainly been local Nigerian companies, and this is something that we see sometimes when NGOs put pressure on big international companies. It also happened to Shell in eastern Russia around the Sakhalin fields, and the companies can be replaced, the international companies can be replaced by local companies which are not subject to the same scrutiny. So the NGOs do not scrutinize the public accounts of local Nigerian companies. The domestic companies in Russia don't have the same number of international press conferences, or they're not as concerned about their international reputation as the international oil companies are. So there is this as you say, twin-edged sword for the NGOs, which is, on the one hand, they want to put as much pressure on international oil companies as possible to make them behave in ways that the NGOs consider appropriate. However, if the NGOs push hard and those companies pull out, there may well be a situation whereby international NGOs and other bodies are actually in less of a position to influence events on the ground in these countries.
Tom, thank you so much for shedding light on the story. Tom Bergin is a European corporate strategy correspondent for Reuters, joining us there from London.